Going forward, these monthly roundups will focus more on the avant garde, weird things that I think are kind of overlooked. Countless other people are already curating the great music coming out, and honestly, I think narrowing my scope to just the weird great records is more exciting and less exhausting to me personally. It gives me time to sit with the records a bit more too, which is nice. First up, I missed this one last month, but I literally cannot skip over it. Salt River by Sam Amidon is a masterpiece. It's amazing. Everyone is trying to get to the bar. The name of that bar is called Valhalla. I think it's quite unusual that a word that isn't the artist or title, tavern, is also written on the cover. There's pretty much nothing else on the cover. I think possibly that tavern is called Valhalla. There is certainly a theme of death and perhaps the afterlife on this record. Uh, what is Salt River, though? Well, when the Apache were forced off their land and ultimately into a reservation, a small group stayed and fought to eventually be killed. The other Apache called them Tonto, or fools. That became the Tonto Basin in Arizona, which later became Salt River. Tried to force them off their land, so the feds gave some pieces of silver to the nephew of Del Shay, the leader of a resistance movement, to have him killed. And his widow cried for 100 days, as legend would have it. She cried so much that she created a salt river with her tears. Onto the actual music itself. This is a must listen for any fan of folk music, comprised mostly of folk classics in a way that feels both faithful, traditional, and innovative. This album warps time around you as you meditate on death. European doctors ought to play this for their terminally ill patients in a controlled setting. It feels paradoxical at every step. His singing is like monotonously flat, relaxing, while also soaring above the music in perfect harmony with it. There's a hypnotic quality to the instrumentation that's a bit like being between parallel worlds. The singing and music feel disjointed and harmonious at the same time. Big Sky is quite an interesting track. It always makes me think of the Flammarion engraving, which makes me think of these shower curtains I used to have. I got them because they looked like the sky in that woodcut, and I'd pretend that I was peering through the veil by going into or out of the shower. This album is like taking a shower just beyond the firmament curtains. Sam really brings out the spiritual pathos from these classics, and the few things that aren't folk classics are great too and fit in perfectly.
It will fit perfectly.
His cover of Yoko Ono's Ask the Elephant is perhaps my favorite song on the record, and it has such a different vibe and context. It reminds me a lot of Juliana Hatfield's Silly Goofball Poems, which is Jack Kerouac set to relaxing guitar. Next to the other tracks about death and seeing beyond our small lives, silly little joke like an elephant saying, "I'm small, I just look big to you," comes across like it fits right in with the spiritual themes of this album. His cover of Coltrane's Friends and Neighbors is another area where this seemingly disparate element just slots right into the themes. You're small, you will die. Where is it at? Friends and neighbors. That's where it's at. It's also interesting that these are the influences that he is drawing on. Uh, Plastic Ono Band, Coltrane, and you know, folk classics. It is just a fantastic, contemplative, beautiful album with tons of replay value. I beseech you to listen to this record. I will link everything that I talk about in the description. So first, finish this and like and subscribe and whatever. Um, Up next, we have Polish neoclassical composer Wojciech Rusin, who's back to finish his alchemical trilogy of albums with Honey for the Ants, a texture-based product that quite frankly needs to be listened to on good speakers, something that'll shake you a little bit with its central distortions. It's made largely with his 3D printed custom pipe instruments to try to scratch at primal archetypal sounds. Deerhoof dropped a single, Overrated Species, Sparrow Sparrow. This double B-sided single is dedicated to all of those who won't lick the boot of fascism, with proceeds going to the Trevor Project. Sonically, the first B-side is like a lightly cooked, slowly pulsating thin mass of albumin hovering a few centimeters above the sidewalk. It's light, airy, but has some physical presence to it, which is to say that it reminds me kind of Sung Tongs. The second B-side, again, strictly sonically speaking, kicks things into overdrive, and it is when that sizzled egg starts scuttling across the ground like the baby Horta from Star Trek the original series. It's a cool single. I'm not sure if that's informative. Up next, we have the new remix of Balada para la Corporatocracia by DJ and Dutch punk rocker Andy Moor. The original track came out last year on Mysticix, a fantastic album by husband and wife duo Ibelisse, Guardia, Ferragutti, and Frank Rosaly. They both have very interesting artistic backgrounds in experimental and improvised music, and painstakingly crafted a fantastic record. Um, these folks should be on your radar. They're fantastic. Andy Moore should be on your radar. Always lots of great music coming off of International Anthem. Up next, we take a little suckle at New York City's Big Fat Titties with Joe McPhee. I'm just saying. Joe McPhee is an old head, 85-year-old avant jazz saxophonist who's been blending in extremely complimentary spoken word poetry to his work for the last decade or so. This album is some interesting poetic improvisations over minimalistic, gritty, avant jazz instrumentation produced by Mats Gustafsson. Some parts are very dramatic, sometimes it can get a little silly. I like this album a lot. In similar spoken word territory, we have Chicago artist Damon Locke's List of Demands. Intense spoken word poetry over some kind of patchwork sampling beats that are at times eerily repetitive. This album very much sounds like Damon's visual art looks, mixed media, collage together, calls for strength to band together, ward off isolation in the spirit of love while acknowledging the dismal state of affairs that we are currently living through. I really like the phrase, you reflected many times like glitter. You reflected many times like glitter. You reflected many times like glitter. What even is music? Why am I a fan of music, honestly? Up next, we have Ecce Shnak, no, Shnak with a bizarre art pop EP, Shadows Grow Fangs. It feels like it pivots between various rock subgenres and epic operatic sections over and over again. It's one of those projects that seems more strange to me with time, especially when I sat down and try to put it into words. There's songs about Jeremy Bentham, interspecies communication, and carrier pigeons trying to comprehend the internet. The internet is very fertile ground for songs lately. Clipping had a really good song, Change the Channel, about that this month. So, the internet. I think the line, I was going to put the effort in, but I was too busy making love to the internet, is really great. Emphasis on making love. I think a seductive succubus is a powerful way of portraying the internet, a dark collective anima. Anyway, this song compares past technologies to the internet, and I think expresses some kind of anxiety about humans handing over thought and creativity to automation. A thing that is absolutely happening to some people. I think the ghostly visages in the music video are perhaps ghosts of humans who were gutted of their very souls by the internet. Unless it's just supposed to look cool, in which case it does. My one gripe with this EP is I can't find the lyrics anywhere, and it's kind of hard to understand the operatic singing. They're very clearly saying some things here, so I wish I could know what exactly that is, at least in the literal sense. Prayer on Love is my favorite track because I keep thinking about it, trying to figure it out. I have two mostly conflicting reads on what it could mean. Um, I could see it being a kind of agnostic theist anthem, as in, I'm not saying I'm right, or that that's the only truth, or the only thing that matters in the first place, but, I feel something engaging with spiritual practices. Prayer has certain connotations. Many faith traditions have some concept of God as love or God is love. Or, second option, some kind of polytheistic framing for a critique on toxic positivity. There's a value in tearing something harmful down. Countervailing forces are/should be at play. That interpretation makes the first verse make more sense, but makes the line, maybe it, love, is not a thing at all, hard to reconcile, at least for me. Love's existence seems to not be very hotly contested unless God is love and love is God, and then that brings us back to the first interpretation. Sound off in the comments. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the song. What few comments there were on the music video, a couple of them were trying to figure this out because they're saying something, and I think the song deserves us paying attention to what it is that they're trying to say because it's a good song. Up next, we have a soundtrack, Goodbye Horses, The Many Lives of Q Lazzarus. This is a mostly fairly conventional 80s pop rock album, save for a few weirder tracks like the reggae-tinged Gershwin cover, but mostly pretty normal record to me. She has a powerful singing voice, good command of her craft, reverbed out production, awesome key tones and drum tracks. She's pretty, which is important for pop stars for some unjustifiable reason. So, why was this album collecting dust for decades? Barring the two bizarre exceptions, of course, like the big hit from this record happening decades ago, to footage of a cross dressing psychopath dancing with a woman's severed scalp on his head. Is that accurate? I've never seen Silence of the Lambs.
Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lamb is a lovely man. He wants to have you for dinner.
Silence of the Lamb.
He's a lovely man.
I smell like lamb.
So good with radishes.
For God's sake, Jennifer.
Jonathan Demme, director of Stop Making Sense, which I have analyzed at some length on this channel, and also director of some other stuff that I've never seen, was taking a cab one day when the cabbie showed him her demo tape. He was floored by what he heard. He featured her music in 2 of his films, the only proper release that she ever got until Lazzarus was rather appropriately resurrected while giving a cab ride to another director, Eva Argis Fuentes, who was looking for Q to make a documentary on her. Eva asked the cabbie if she knew Q. She took the rest of the drive to ponder if she really wanted to go public. But as she was dropping Eva off, she finally fessed up and admitted that, yeah, she is Q. Eva took about 100 hours of footage and constructed a 1.7-hour documentary, finally shedding some light on Q's mysterious backstory. It's my understanding that the film will be coming to streaming at some point early this year. The soundtrack finally gave Q a proper musical release, so I recommend taking some time to familiarize yourself with her other songs that are not just Goodbye Horses in the meantime. You know, don't say you love the anime if you haven't read the manga. This album is like hearing a pop star perfectly preserved in amber, untouched by our timeline, brimming with kinetic potential. Some of the songs on here are not hits and likely wouldn't have been. There's a couple on here that I don't even like, honestly, that, when it gets too glammy, it gets a little bit too glam rock, a little too cheesy, but most of the album is pretty good. The album itself poses so many questions, like, what would her career have been with a little industry support? Why did her work go unheard for so long? Why is it heard now? I don't know if the track listing is a chronological career retrospective, but it kind of sounds like it because when you listen to the album, I feel like you can hear the 80s become the 90s. That's all for this video, but subscribe because I have a big video essay coming out in a few days on an old avant-garde favorite. Also, leave a like and a comment. Tell me what you've been listening to, what you're looking forward to, what you think of these releases, and if these releases were cartoons, what cartoon would they be? I think that Salt River would be characters from yonder website.
1, 2, 3, 4, I look big. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for watching.
It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly.
Silence of the Lambs.
He's a lovely man.